Welcome to the Perfect Life Awakening Show, hosted by Royce Morales. Royce has been a transformational facilitator, teaching groundbreaking, spiritually based courses for more than 4 decades. She is the author of 3 books about her teachings. Join Royce as she takes you on a journey into how to live your best life and find your true purpose through discovering the origins of subconscious, disempowering notions and releasing them. She talks with experts and inspiring people just like you who learned to trust their intuitive inner wisdom, which led to life-changing shifts. Today, her guests live an empowered existence and are helping change the world to a higher consciousness place based on truth and love. You deserve to awaken to, align with, and embody your true self and live a life filled with love. Transform yourself from triggered to empowered and create your perfect life. Here is your host, Royce Morales.
Welcome, welcome. I'm so glad to be here today with all of you people out there. And my wonderful guest, I'm so excited to invite Leah Guy to my show because she's going to talk about toxic emotions. And she's going to explain what they are, where they come from, what to do about them, what happens from them. I talk a lot about emotions in my Perfect Life Awakening program, but I'm sure she has a different take on them. So let me just introduce you. Leah is an author, a new thought leader, an inspirational speaker, and a spiritual teacher focusing on emotional healing and personal development. She overcame early life traumas, and she's going to tell us what some of those are. Boy, big ones. And they resulted in all kinds of things: eating disorder, anxiety disorder, etc. And her personal growth development helps her to inspire others to live healthier and more fulfilling lives, which we all need, especially nowadays, right? Her work is about taking responsibility. Mine is too, definitely. And that's the hardest thing for people to do. But it's about understanding why we feel bad and why we are responsible for that. So we're also going to talk about why, or she's going to talk about why we aren't having the kind of life experiences and relationships that we want. And why do we sabotage ourselves all the time? One of my courses is called Transform Self-Sabotage. So we are definitely on the same wavelength. So welcome, Leah. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks so much. With that intro, it's like I could solve everybody's problems.
Hey.
But let me assure you, I cannot.
I thought you could. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, tell us how you got started. What started you on this path?
Well, I would consider myself kind of the classic wounded healer. You know, I was always interested as a very young person in both wellness and spirit and angels and also media. And then I went through a series of pretty substantial life experiences, like many people do in my youth. And it was through those experiences that eventually I came kind of, to the point where I was on my knees begging for help, for assistance, mercy, guidance, what have you. And it led me to the path that I am still on today.
Yes. It seems that a lot of people that are drawn to this field have, like you said, wounded healer. I think that's really significant. Yeah. So explain, I guess, right from the get-go, just explain what you mean by toxic emotions, because I talk about emotions maybe in a little bit of a different way. So let me hear your take on that.
Well, all emotions are valid, and all emotions are applicable in the circumstances in which we have them. But for a lot of people, we've learned how to protect ourselves and hold on to certain emotions that become toxic within us. And they're not all just the emotions that we might traditionally think of, like anger, for example. There's nothing wrong with anger on its own. But when anger becomes toxic, and now we get into resentment, revenge, all these different other emotions, And sometimes there's emotions that kind of seem benign that can become toxic, like apathy, for example, and we've all had periods of our life where maybe we feel a little apathetic or disconnected or non-engaged. That goes on too long and unchecked and not really looking at and where the impetus of that apathy is from or what cycle that is in, then it can create, dangerous disconnection within ourselves, dissociation, numbing out, problems in our relationships. So there's all kinds of things that can happen from toxic emotions. And there's a lot of emotions that can become toxic.
How do they become toxic? Explain
Well,
that.
it's mostly just the holding on, repressing, and it's I describe it like keeping them captive within us, holding them prisoner in their own cell that just kind of keep germinating and mushrooming and growing, either within that cell or expanding into different parts of us. And then we start projecting those onto the world or onto other people or onto our past. And we kind of get stuck in the stew, if you will. It's like we just kind of live from that place because we're trying to protect those emotions from coming up again or from coming out because they scare us or they make us highly uncomfortable. When we have anger, when we have grief, when we have disappointment, when we have a wide variety of emotions, it's very uncomfortable to allow those to just move through us and process them in real time. And the truth is, sometimes we can't do it in real time. And that's where we have trauma. And that's where we have, the propensity to do the splitting or dissociating from self. If we didn't have a safe environment, if we didn't have safe people that could help us process, if we were at an age that we had lacked the emotional maturity to process our true feelings, some of those can get stuck in our system and kind of become toxic. So it's really up to us as we enter into adulthood and our maturation and our self-consciousness and awareness that we take care of this aspect of ourselves.
And so when you say we suppress them or repress them,
Mm-hmm.
how do you recommend? I know I'm married to somebody that he's wonderful. He's he's my best healer because he just lets me get it out. And he realizes, oh, it's just this emotion that she needs to get out. And
Mm-hmm.
then as soon as it's out, I'm done. Do you recommend getting it out in some way for
Yeah,
people?
most of the time. I think some people, we have to back up before that because a lot of people are so in their head and they're in the thought about the emotion. They're not in the emotion themselves. And some people aren't very practiced at actually feeling the sensation of emotion itself.
Yes.
So I think starting there is a good place for people. I love like somatic body work or somatic therapies for this, just to feel into your body, like what is actually going on. When you work with the subconscious, so we know like when the subconscious mind takes over, it's very easy for us to believe that something is happening that's not even actually really happening in the present moment. We pull upon memories, we pull upon fears, we pull upon worries, doubts, sensations, feelings from the past. And the truth is, a lot of people are walking around, they don't even know what their feeling is right now. For example, someone may say, I have anxiety. This is a very common thing, right? I have an anxiety disorder. I have anxiety. And when they come into my door, I always say, you're anxious right now? No. So you don't have anxiety. Well, I do have anxiety, but I don't have it right now. And I was like, well, why don't we first just start by separating that? What is the truth of this particular moment of reality now? Because that is all that exists versus the truth of your history and the pattern that you may want to go to in order to identify yourself or claim something about yourself or to have some familiar sensation. So it can start there. There's a lot of places to start. To ask somebody who's not a feeler historically, or maybe a practiced feeler, to just feel their feelings, that's like asking me to, well, just fly the airplane. Okay. So I think that we skip a lot of steps because we're in this culture that just wants to move it along. Just let's quick fix and do the thing. And most people though are really not sure how to do the thing.
Yeah. As you're talking, I'm thinking about how I was raised. I was raised by two people that were absolutely not in touch with their emotions and thought emotions were the worst thing in the world. So
Mhm.
whenever here I am, this sensitive child that would express an emotion, it was shot down. So what
Mhm.
do you find mostly causes people to suppress their emotions?
Oh gosh, it ranges so much. I mean, that's a very familiar story, the one you just told, having unemotional parents. You know, a lot of us in this generation, we obviously came from generations that were not supported in self-reflection and self-expression and a lot of things that we have, come to make palatable in our world. So it can be that. It can be parents or people, caregivers who were addicted and not present, people who are not physically present, feeling unsafe in the environment for one reason or another, maybe not even just emotionally, maybe physically, abusive situations. And, or I think some of us are just kind of, like I said, kind of, we have a constitution of wanting to kind of be more in our head. But I do think that that is a learned system, although some people are definitely more that way. So I think there's a lot of reasons. The primary one, if we really got down to it, would be that it feels bad often
Mm.
to be in our emotions.
But it feels so good when they're out.
Well,
You
yeah, and the good ones also feel so good, but we
Yes,
can't cherry
yeah,
pick. That's the thing. And that true understanding is if we allow ourselves to feel the ones that are uncomfortable, we have even more access to the ones that are beautiful. So
it's true.
there's reward there both ways.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're pushing down one, you're also pushing down the other, really.
Yeah.
So I mentioned in your intro that one of the things you do with people is to help them take responsibility. What exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah. I think it's one of the biggest steps in our self-healing journey when we come to the realization that no one else is responsible for how we feel and how we experience our lives.
Yeah.
And that is inclusive of our stories and our past and our experiences. We have that as markers, as memories, as stories with all the characters that are in them. But at a certain point, when we come into our maturity at a certain level, perhaps, or are maybe forced to come to this point, we have to be the ones to be responsible. I see um, this issue in relationships so much, and it's kind of, in a certain way, it's kind of hard to believe that we're still here. But when I think about myself personally, it's like, oh yeah, this mentality of this other person should make me happy,
Mm, right.
for example, or I want to be with this person because they make me feel beautiful. And the reality is we should feel beautiful on our own. We should feel happy outside of the relationship before we enter the relationship, know how to access the happiness regardless of a relationship. So it presents itself like that, but it also presents itself when we start talking about the victim. A lot of people are stuck in victim mode
Oh yeah.
and blaming everything under the sun for why they are the way that they are. And that's a hard medicine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, back to what you said about wanting to be with someone that makes you feel happy or makes you feel beautiful. You can't, nobody can do that for you anyway.
Yeah.
You have to feel that way about yourself first, and then it just gets reflected back.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I was
So,
in a relationship one time, fairly recently actually, and I had a very bad habit of saying, when things were going wrong, of saying that something he did makes me feel this way. And of course there is correlation because we're in the relationship, we're in the experience of the behavior or what have you. But it became such a, a foul phrase, the make you feel. And I know it's not the most appropriate phrase, even though most people use it. But I really had to reflect on that for the past couple of years of what, how can I own the feeling that I'm having without making it be because of something, but in relationship to that, and then choosing for myself if this is something that's not that doesn't work for me, if this is something that makes me uncomfortable or unsafe, if I'm feeling unsafe, if I'm feeling unheard, if I'm feeling whatever I'm feeling, that I need to take care of myself from that state instead of expecting the other person. Because, when we do that, when we claim for ourselves, we get to see really quickly the character of the other as well. Most people don't intentionally want to hurt the other person, but if they discover that they are hurting the other person or doing some behavior that is, creating an imbalance or feeling of unsafety or something, they want to correct that, but it's harder for them to take ownership of that when we're placing blame on them for the way that we feel. So it shows up a lot there, but it also just shows up in our lives in a bigger way.
Yeah, so many things I want to say at this point. The notion that people kind of like to be the victim. I talk about that a lot in my course. That there's a part of us that just feels like, oh, if I'm a victim, I'm going to get saved, and people will love me and take care of me, and all of that stuff. What are your thoughts about that? Why do people love to stay in that victim place?
Well, that's interesting. I don't know that I would use the word that they love to stay in that victim place. I think it's just a very familiar, safe place to stay so they don't have to experience the also overwhelming sensation of freedom.
Yeah.
Because when we're taking responsibility for our lives and when we're not chained to the other or circumstance for our happiness and so forth, I mean, that's truly what most people on the spiritual path want. But the reality is most people are terrified of that. It's
Yes.
it's a very uncomfortable sensation to feel untethered to whatever, and yet enlightenment and this freedom and higher consciousness and energy, there's this fantasy that all of that is the most beautiful. And I do believe that it is. But to learn how to live in that space, to learn how to be in such trust and such fluidity and such just kind of surrender and grace without the tether to the identity of this happened to me or I am this because of that, it's a very, very brave move.
Yeah.
So I think people who have lower vibrational core wounds that they're still working through or still addicted to, that victim mentality is very similar in frequency to those. So it's a very comfortable place to be. The discomfort is really in the freedom of that. And so in my book, I talk a lot about the how to sustain small steps of change so that we can sustain a higher frequency. And it has nothing to do with, fixing something or improving something. It's all about a feeling state and learning how to feel safe in a way to sustain a higher vibration. And if we can do that, we can break the chains of the addiction or the familiarity to the victim and so forth and stand on our own 2 feet.
And how do you do that with people?
Well, when I'm working with people, I use a lot of different tools. I do intuitive readings. I do a lot of soul retrieval work, which is also an ancient practice and an intuitive practice. Sometimes we do inner child work. I help them identify their core wounds. I use other kinds of, tools that many of us know about, meditation, EFT, somatic work, different types of integration work. And doing that, in the book, I talk about, these 3 simple steps, but I think we have to have the tools. So if we're doing the tools and using these 3 simple steps, which are awaken or acknowledge, accept, and act, then we can awaken to this a different possibility. Those 3 simple words are so hard to achieve. And that's what's frustrating for people. It's frustrating to me in our society because everyone's throwing out these words and so few people are actually embodying the energy of those words themselves.
Yeah, yeah. So you talk about neutralizing suppressed traumas or getting past them. What happens from that? What is the general result from all of this work that you do?
Well, my process is in the way I work with people, like myself. As you mentioned, I've had several traumas in my life. When I I had an aunt who was murdered. I went through a rape. My parents got divorced. All of this happened in a very short window of time. And when people ask me how I overcame the rape, the truth is one, I stopped focusing on the person who did this. I stopped focusing on the perpetrator, right? Number two, the practice of this healing to me is not about really overcoming it, even though this book says overcoming. That was not my choice. It's not really about overcoming. It's about the integration and the expansion of self in order to hold it. So I carry that with me. I carry those things with me today, but not in a state of victim or being triggered or it's somehow informing who I am today. I'm carrying it today with pride, not pride that it happened, but just this is mine. And I have enough strength in my center. There's an analogy that I used in my first book about, us having a pillar. If you think of a concrete or a marble pillar, like a beautiful ancient one that's in the center of us. And a lot of people think, and it feels this way, that when bad things happen to us, it's like someone is chiseling on that pillar, and then we become fragmented and our pillar becomes weaker and weaker and more distorted. But if you think of it in the way that all of these circumstances and experiences that happen to us, they add to our pillar. And as it adds to our pillar, it just makes us stronger and more solidified. But we can't run away from it at that point. With that perspective, we can't let ourselves be identified with a person who took something from us. That's the victim mentality. Mm-hmm. And we don't need the martyr mentality. We don't need the pride of the ego that says, I've won or I've overcome. It's the space of learning how to sustain self in the center of discomfort and joy and balancing that and holding the reality, being able and willing to stay with whatever it is. If we feel hurt, if we feel overwhelmed, if we feel in love, if we feel joyful, if we feel destitute, can we just feel that and be with that without reacting to that? And when I think about the things that have happened to me in the past, it's like, wow. And I remember the uncomfortable feelings, but I don't have the uncomfortable feelings that come up and want to inform who I am today. So it's about strengthening and expanding so that we can actually carry it with us instead of trying to let it go, instead of feeling fragmented, instead of feeling like we're in a million pieces and we've lost our power. We have even more.
Yes, definitely. Now, you talk in your bio, you mentioned that you address the spiritual aspect of all of this. In what way do you do that?
What do you mean? What do you mean? I don't understand the question. Sorry.
In terms of, let's just use your traumatic experience as an example. Okay. Do you look at that in terms of why you experienced that on a spiritual level, or what that was supposed to teach you on a spiritual level, or why perhaps from a past life you brought it forward, that kind of spiritual stuff?
Yeah, I do. I try not to get into that mentality of, I think that there's this mentality of everything happens for a reason that we default to that can sometimes become dangerous.
Yes.
So although I do believe everything happens for a reason, but there's this personal aspect to that, which I think is the dangerous one of like, everything's happening to me for a particular reason. And this is where I believe we have such limited understanding of what is actually happening in the cosmos, in existence. And we are part of that for certain. We are part of the fabric that is woven. And I don't think we can deny that. And I do believe, kind of like karma, that everything affects the next thing. And I do believe our energy never dies and that we're constantly learning and evolving and growing. And so I believe all that. But I think that sometimes our perspective is too tight on the me, on the personalization, because we need me to mean everything to me. And if we can widen a lot, and get a very meta perspective, I always say this, I can't wait till I die in a certain way, because I cannot wait to I know it's just awesome to see how all of this works together, and the ramifications and the connections and everything. I cannot wait to see it. And that doesn't take away the pain of what happens to us, certainly. But I don't think it's so specific of this happened, so now this happened, and now that happened, and now this happened. I think we do kind of experience a karmic pull of energy, and what we do matters and what everyone does matter. But I also don't think everything is so personal that we have to make it that personal. I mean, what if just bad things happen because they do, because we know that they do. We know that they do. This is that back to that being able to hold space for the polarity that pain and love coexist. They always will. The dark and the light. It is always there. It is always there. And we're going to get both, And so under that system, that's a little, much broader than the system of I did this and I'm going to get punished. I think that's a very learned experience that probably started in a lot of religious, creation, and maybe before, I'm not sure. We have the superstition about us, I think, in a kind of a natural way. But if we can back up and go, okay, the good things happened and the bad things happened, and I was part of all of that, and that is life, And it doesn't mean I'm good or bad. It doesn't mean I messed up here or there. It doesn't mean I got a reward. I wasn't, I was good for Christmas and Santa gave me what I wanted, or God is mad at me, so I'm getting punished. Maybe it doesn't mean any of that. Maybe it means we're alive.
Awesome. Well, we need to take a quick break and we'll be right back. I'm talking to Leah Guy, and we were talking about toxic emotions and all kinds of fun stuff. And I'm going to ask you about soul retrieval, because
Okay.
that's a really important topic. So we'll be right back.
Om Times TV. Do you crave joy but feel stuck? Do you go through life feeling constantly triggered and frustrated? Fear is likely the culprit, and subconscious fear is likely sabotaging you. Perfect Life Awakening is a time-tested, spiritually based approach to inner transformation created by Royce Morales. For over 40 years, she has helped people get to the origins of subconscious fears and ultimately help them find their true purpose and a life full of joy. Sign up for Perfect Life Awakening today at roycemorales.com. You deserve to go from triggered to empowered, shifting your life with Perfect Life Awakening. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
I want to eat apples and bananas. I need to eat apples and bananas. Why can't I eat apples and bananas?
Support the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks to help provide meals to those in need. Join us at feedingamerica.org.
Welcome back. I'm talking with Leah Guy. We're talking about toxic emotions and a whole lot of other things. And I mentioned before the break that I would love to hear you talk about soul retrieval. What is that and what happens from that and what is the purpose of that? Tell us about
Yeah,
that.
I'm glad you asked about that. And actually, I saw one of the commenters asked how to reduce the feelings of why me in the
Yeah.
comments. And soul retrieval is a beautiful practice to help address those kinds of feelings or those states that we find ourselves in. Basically, soul retrieval is a shamanistic practice that's been used for thousands of years, and it addresses parts of us that maybe a modern day therapist would call has dissociated or split due to trauma or overwhelming experiences. And the way that I think of it is when we go through experiences that we don't have the place to process or the ability to process fully, it impacts our psyche. It impacts all of us. And sometimes, depending on the circumstance, parts of us just kind of separate, and it separates to go find safety so that it's not staying in this overwhelmed state of fear or trauma or upset. And so in soul retrieval, it's a very intuitive process. At least for me, it is. I actually enter into the timeline with the person themselves through their permission. And I find specific dates, ages, or events that have showed up of parts that are ready to come home, parts that are ready to reintegrate into the adult self. And this is not linear. It doesn't have anything to do with, well, first this happened, then this happened, then this happens. It's about our availability of where we are in our journey right now, how open and able we are to welcome in those parts, and also the safety and availability of the part itself. So I think of it like a soul essence, if you will. And then we call that part back home, and there's an integration process. And it's subtle but profound work of healing and restoration and remembering personality, characteristics, desires, all kinds of things can happen.
Wow, that's wonderful. Yeah.
Mm.
So, what other techniques do you use? Well, give us an example of maybe something that the people that are watching right now can actually use in their own life that can help them realize what's going on and maybe resolve or release some of those toxic emotions.
Yeah, well, as far as techniques and releasing the toxic emotions, I'd like us to think about how to process them,
Yes.
which often requires the assistance of someone else, especially if you're not a skilled feeler,
Yeah.
if you're a person who's kind of avoided that. But like EFT, I think is great. I don't use it myself much anymore personally, unless maybe in a specific moment I might with the tapping. Are you familiar with EFT?
Yeah. But maybe
Yeah.
tell the
Okay.
listeners.
Yeah, it's basically a tapping technique that runs over courses that follow meridian points on the body, and we're basically stimulating and disrupting the looping that is happening both mentally, energetically, emotionally. So, for example, like I went through a period of time where I was terrified to fly. I still don't love it, but I'm not terrified like I was. I mean, there was another point I was terrified to drive on the highway. And so we know that there's these anxieties that we have or these fears that we have. And most people are focusing on the fear itself. They'll do like hypnotherapy to figure out how to fly or drive again or what have you. Well, I think that underneath that, there's always a deep and informative part of us that is trying to get our attention. And so, for example, if you have a fear, paranoia, or something like that, you can use this tapping once you identify the feeling that is really going on. And for me, strangely enough, what was coming up when I was flying is my self worth.
Hmm.
I did not believe that I was worthy enough to have experiences and go from here to there in a dangerous situation just to go enjoy myself
Well,
or just to go do something different. If I was traveling for work, I was fine. I wasn't perfectly fine. Well, yeah, I was. I was pretty fine. In fact, years before, I loved to fly. So this is just an example of it's not the thing itself. There's something going on, and we can't judge that part of us of what's going on. We have to attend to it. because at different stages of our life, there's going to be different information. And so I started tapping with the setup statement and going through the process of, even though I am feeling like my self-worth is going to create an accident because, I'm not worthy enough to enjoy myself and my life. I do deeply and completely love and accept myself. And that's like a setup statement for the EFT. And I got to where I was using it so much, basically it de-escalates the feeling or the looping mental pattern that wants to show up. Oh, I'm getting on a plane. I need to feel anxious. Oh, I'm doing this. I need to feel whatever I feel. And so it can de-escalate it. And so where it's tolerable. And the wonderful thing about tapping is you can do it. You can do it like I would sit on the end of the airplane in the aisle and just tap, and nobody knows what I'm doing. And I'm saying the setup statement, and I'm just kind of tapping because there's no perfect way to do this. It's just opening up those meridian channels, disrupting. And that's a big word I think that can help everyone is how can I disrupt this thought or this behavior that I'm about to engage in or this emotion that I want to kick over to because it's just repetitive, subconscious, kind of lazy, imprinted, addictive feelings, thoughts, behaviors that we're doing. How can we disrupt it? And EFT is one way that we can.
Okay. I think it's important what you said that you realized it was about self-worth because in the work that I do, that's the bottom, that's the core that people need to get to really resolve things. Where did I decide that I don't deserve? Where did I decide that I'm not a worthy person? And, disrupting that or resolving that or sourcing that, the origins of that is life shifting. So that's great that you realize that.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. I mean, I would say shame and self-worth is probably one of the most predominant core wounds. There are others though that I've recognized in people and even if it's not your core wound, it's something we all have to deal with, Yeah.
So we've been talking about toxic emotions. What about toxic people? Talk about that.
Okay. There are toxic people. What would you like me to say about that?
How do they impact us? Why do they have so much power over us? What is that about? And how would you describe what does a toxic person really look like?
Okay. Well, there are toxic people and they don't need to have power over us. That's the main
Right.
thing I would say.
Absolutely.
So the conversation can be really short about this because we give so much of our energy and focus to other people. It's a really dangerous conversation, I think, that's going on social media and other places about, being so empathic that people feel drained or they're around these energy vampires. It's dangerous because it's kind of like giving ourselves a reason to be in that victim state. Like, oh, I'm so good at it's like kind of narcissistic in a certain way.
Yes.
It's like
Yes.
we're all empathic. Empathy
Yes.
is one of our innate states of being, and
Yes.
it's not here to hurt us. We
Yeah.
have learned to not have boundaries, to put ourselves in other people's business, to empath other people's emotions and so forth, when we don't need to do that. If someone's toxic, let them be toxic. If I don't allow it to bother me, it doesn't bother me.
Right.
It's challenging, but this is the self-responsibility of like, oh, okay, there's that, I'm going to not engage if I don't have to. I'm going to, just focus on something else. But what does it matter? It's like there's a purple flower. I don't like purple. Okay. Am I going to let the purple flower make me feel weird today? I had a healing center for years and oh my gosh, it was probably the number one thing people came in because, we had events and meditations and I did my healing work there. But I also sold crystals and sage and all that kind of stuff. And people come in saying, what can I get to protect me from my boss or from this toxic environment or whatever? And I was like, don't spend any money here. You need to work on, like focusing on yourself. And in that same way, I was talking about the pillar. This is the same kind of energy. It's like strengthen yourself, expand yourself, have healthy boundaries yourself, be free and happy in the space in the container that you create and no problem.
Yeah.
If you have holes, if you have low boundaries, if you're like into other people because of whatever that serves that part of your ego or whatever, then you're doing this to yourself,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you ever, I know that a lot of what I do is I have people understand why they've attracted certain people, certain toxic situations, to whatever it is they've attracted. Do you ever work with people in that realm?
Yeah, I mean, in that sense of like mirroring each other for
Yes.
sure, and what we manifest. That's in this book. I talk a lot about how we attract what we attract in our lives because it all matches our what I call our baseline number from our emotional energetic imprint. That's
Yes.
from our core wound, from the frequency that was developed from the way that we suffered and the belief system that we built up over that. So if you're still attracting things that make you feel that way, that's why you're attracting them, because I use a number system in the book, so if my baseline is a number 3, for example, and I know that doesn't have much reference here, but if it's a number 3 and I'm out attracting threes in the world and I want to be attracting something else, then I have to look at how have I not moved my own needle? Where am I on my self-care work? What do I really believe? Where am I falling into these old patterns? Because we can't attract something different that we're not, so I think that's where the work begins.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And what you said is really important. I talk a lot about mirroring. I have a whole show on mirroring on the other Wednesdays because we attract what we are. Exactly. So if I attract a toxic person, there's some part of me that believes I'm toxic and I need to look at that. So they're my best teacher.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
not the wholeness of who we are, but that's the thing we're all scared of. It's like we all have the capacity to be all things and to feel all things and to do all things. And we judge other people because we think I would never do that, but we have the capacity for it. And so if there are lingering parts of us that are struggling with something, or, in our authentic being, that we go incoherent in different ways, and then we witness that in another person, it can bother us, or we
Yes.
can go, oh, wow, there it is.
There it is. Yeah.
There
There's
it is. And not be afraid to let that be you. It's okay that
Yeah.
it's us.
Yeah.
I have all kinds of parts of me that, I mean, I love to swear like a sailor. I want to die on the front porch eating chocolate chip cookies and chain smoking cigarettes. You know what I mean? Like, there's all these parts of me.
Yeah.
Okay. That doesn't deflate the love and the heart and the resonance that I have with spirit and the higher stuff. It doesn't. In fact, it probably helps support it.
Yes. Yeah. Very true. I somehow can't picture you sitting on a porch eating chocolate chip
Oh, I
cookies.
can. Yeah, I can.
Wow. So what else? What other techniques or little hints you can give people? You talked about the AAA
Mhm.
theory that you have. Tell us about that a little bit more.
Yeah, so that's that acknowledge, accept, and act. Um, I guess for the sake of right now, I would talk about the act part, because in that light of us wanting to do different things to try to fix ourselves and fix situations, action doesn't have to be this doingness. It can be the conscious awareness. It can be a breath. It can be actually not doing something. But we do have to disrupt and kind of um, have movement toward where we want to be. But I talk about micro steps in the action portion, because in that same way, you may have seen there's this great illustration meme where there's two ladders, and on one ladder there's all these little rungs, and on the other ladder there's rungs that are really spaced out, and they both go to the same place. And the guy that has the little rungs, he's able to climb right up that ladder, and the guy over here with the big rungs can't even reach the top rung to go up on the ladder at all.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very perfect illustration of what happens when we think we're broken and we're desperate to be better. And of course, that sends us right back to the conversation of, am I enough? We're not here to fix anything. We're here to learn how to move in a direction that supports our soul growth, our connection, our heart opening. And to do that, we have to learn how to, whatever we do, to sustain it. If we're not able to sustain it, we're just reaching for another high and then going to fall right back on our butts. So this isn't about big achievements and climbing mountains and becoming enlightened. This is about, oh, how can I be a little more kind to myself today and do that every day? How can I be a little more open when I go out into the world and not first go to judgment because I'm feeling inferior? Can I sustain that? How can I be more authentic on social media? And can I sustain that? It's all these little ways that if we learn to sustain them, that is the support that we need to make changes that will shift our vibration, our frequency, our emotional selves, our energetic selves, and thereby our physical selves. So I think it's a really important part because people, it's like, I'm going to go do this month-long retreat in India and do my eat, pray, love, and my life is going to be changed. And I want to just get rid of all the stuff in me that hurt, that is somehow not good.
No, they don't want it in a month. They want it in a day.
Right. Or a day or a weekend, and I'm a person who leads. I have a weekend retreat coming up in May, I love them and they are transformative, but they're not life-changing unless you learn how to apply and sustain the energy of what you're doing in that retreat in your daily life behind closed doors.
Yes. Yeah, I find that to be really true because, we're dealing with lifetimes of stuff, and if you don't believe in past lives, you're dealing with a lifetime of stuff. So
Right.
it's going to take as long as it takes. And that's frustrating for people. It really is. We live in this fast food mentality. We want it all. I mean, now, go to one webinar and get it all,
Right.
It's not
Yeah.
even a day. Yeah.
And even that's overwhelming. I mean, there's zillions of teachers and offerings and courses, it's so overwhelming. And so I guess maybe another thing I would say to encourage people is, do some background investigation if you want to work with someone or study with someone and make sure you resonate with them, make sure they're at a level where they can actually sustain and be present for you with what you need to do, so we have to ask those questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I find that, I started a lot of my spiritual journey. I started at the age of 4, but when I really got into it, I was involved in organizations that had these huge audiences. And I found that it couldn't work for me because there was no personal attention and there was no interaction. And it was just this group thing. So I found that when I started teaching, I wanted to keep it small so I could really be there for people. I think that's so important. I really do. And I'm glad that you're doing it that way. I am.
Mhm. Yeah, I like to do it both ways, actually. I do like to reach a large amount of people, but I also love intimate group
Yeah.
settings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us about your book. And you have other books too. Tell us how people can find out more about what you do and read your books. And
Yeah, sure. Well, they're all on Amazon or anywhere books are sold. They're also, some of them are in different languages. The last one is the Overcoming Toxic Emotions, a practical guide of how to build better relationships with yourself and others. The one before this is a spiritual journal for women. Also not my title. It's for men too. There's absolutely nothing in that book that's specific to women. And the first one is The Fearless Path. I'm working on a new book concept now. So I do like to write. I like to offer that. And the feedback has been really great. People can also find me on my website, which is just my name, leahguy.com, and social media, Leah the Modern Sage. And I teach on Insight Timer and I have courses, so there's a wide variety of offerings if someone wants to connect.
yes. Oh, I just got a little message there. 300 watching.
Oh, great. Hi, 300.
So if there's one piece of advice that you can leave our audience with, what would it be? What would you, somebody said, I just want one piece of wisdom from you. What would that be?
To remember that it is impossible to have a value less than the greatest. If you believe that you are tapped in or connected to source or to the oneness of all things, that it is an illusion to have any less value than what is. So this self-worth, this I'm not enough, this questioning, self-doubting, it doesn't even make logical sense.
Yeah.
So just to remind people that we are connected in that way. And The connection is where the value is, and we can never be disconnected. We can have the sensation that we're disconnected, but that's just the illusion. That's the illusion of our humanity. We are never disconnected. And that is what is so beautiful to me. When we can remember that, if I'm working with a client and they remember that and I help them to do that, we've done our job. We have won. There is such safety and remembering when we're healing, and the remembering is part of that connection. So if anyone's feeling that way, because I know it's easy to feel that way, I just want to remind them that it's an illusion. It cannot be true. Those two things cannot be both true. You can't be connected and disconnected.
Yeah. And it's about connecting to yourself as well, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I have one course on Insight Timer. It's called Regaining Trust. And it's a beautiful course. It's only 5 days. A lot of people have taken it. And that course was just very channeled through me from spirit. It's about trusting yourself, trusting in the divine, and trusting others. And it's a game changer when we actually learn to trust in ourselves. And when that becomes the first order of business in our humanness, and when we learn to trust the divine, when that becomes the first order of business for our soul, and when we're operating from that place, it's just a different experience with people, again, in that same way of like toxic people and energy vampires. And I don't know if I can trust them. Don't worry about trusting them. If you trust yourself, you can't lose. You may be heartbroken sometime, you may be not chosen, you may be hurt or whatever, but can you trust yourself to be able to get through that? And so it's the strengthening of self, this resolve, this commitment to, I'm the caretaker of this precious soul who is here to experience and learn. And can I trust myself to move through all of these experiences with as much integrity and grace, and the ability to feel whatever I feel, and all those things are okay, so I can stay in my center, so that I can stay, not disappear, not have our souls leave ourselves, not dissociate, not try to run away from things, not try to let it all go and just show up for the shiny stuff. Can I just stay? Can I stay? And when we're staying, it's such a powerful position.
Yes. Wow. Very inspirational. I just have to ask you one more question. You mentioned something about learning. What do you think is the main thing that we're supposed to learn being in these physical bodies, in this physical realm? What are we really here to learn?
I think it's 100% about our heart, about how to be open in our heart space. Yeah, 100%. That's the only thing that connects everything and every one of us.
Yeah.
And we feel it, we know it. When we're not in our heart, and when we are, some people actually aren't sure because it's been so long since they've really been in the heart. Again, it's a very vulnerable state. It's a blissful state. When I do my work with clients, when I'm in readings with spirit, when I'm singing, when I'm worshiping, when I'm praying, it is such a beautiful, I can't even tell you how beautiful it is on that side in the readings, talking to people's dead loved ones and so forth. It brings me to tears every single time. I'm almost in tears right now, just talking about it. It's so profoundly beautiful. And even for people like myself who do this work a lot, it's hard to stay in that state all the time. We want our alone time. We want to sneak back and revert to our pain points. We want to hide. We want to, have the discourse and all that. But I think that's what all this is about. We see it when there's things happen in the world and people come together. We see it in places of worship. We see it in places of service where we're helping serve the hungry or saving people's lives or what have you. It's all heart driven. And anything outside of that is going to be dismantled. Yeah. So that's what I think.
I agree with you. And I feel like the world is going through such chaos and craziness right now that it's taking us, it's kind of like a fast forward to take us to that place. I really do. And, we're going there. We are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a crazy time, but it's a necessary time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It's very transformational.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much. Show your book one more time and tell people how to reach you. There you go. Overcame Toxic Emotions, Leah Guy, and your website is
It's just my name, leahguy.com.
okay.
Yeah, very easy. And yeah, I love to connect with people. So I appreciate you having me on today, and many blessings to everyone.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. Keep up the good work.
Thank
And yeah, and all of you, reach out to Leah, reach out to me if you want to do some of the work that I offer. And it's very compatible to what you were talking about. And make sure to tune in on Wednesdays when I do the alternate Wednesdays when I do my It's All Mirrors show. And yeah. Oh, and follow. I started a Substack a few months ago, so make sure to follow it. It's called Royce's Ramblings. So follow that as well. And thank you again, Leah. And I hope to stay in touch with you.
Thank you. Same. Have a good day.
You too.